Hi,
How are
Dotsie.
you?
Oh, fabulous.
So, who are you?
I am a girl.
You are a girl.
and
That's good.
My pronouns are she, hers. And how much do you really want to know? The whole thing?
I want to know as much as you're willing to tell me.
Okay, well, goodness gracious. Former Olympic athlete, Olympic medalist, now running a nonprofit that fights for justice for all beings. So I'm a vegan, and I work hard to change culture and systemic change as well within our U.S. government in the school lunch program for the 51 million children that rely on it. Trying to make the world a little bit of a better place, just like so many people every day.
Okay, well, it seems like we could be here for the next 39 hours talking about everything that you do, but we have to start somewhere.
Okay.
We have to start somewhere. So let's start. First of all, what's your name?
Dotsie Bausch.
Okay. How are you, Dotsie?
Oh, good. I like the way you say it.
Good,
I always like the way that Brits say it better than Americans.
Good, good, good. So you mentioned how you're an Olympic athlete. You must tell me about that, because I'll tell you a little secret. I'm actually Greek.
Okay.
So, as you know, it was the Greeks that began the magnificence of the Olympic Games, right? The first one being, I believe, the first modern one being in 1896, and then, of course, thousands of years before that. So tell me about how you became an Olympic athlete. What type of athlete? I'm assuming it's an athlete. And
yes.
Yeah, I'd love to know about that. I mean, that's pretty epic.
Okay, well, I haven't gotten to do this before where someone doesn't know, so I feel like I should make you guess, because I think you can. I really think you can if I give you some really hot clues. So it is in the Summer Olympics as opposed to winter. It is considered an endurance sport versus, let's say, a sprint or a pure strength sport.
Okay.
Although it has components of all three, it involves strength and sprint and agility and endurance. In London 2012, where I competed, they called the venue where I competed the Pringle. And it mostly involves my lower body, the sport.
Synchronized swimming?
No. Some of these I'm going to want to say yes to and lie, because they're going to, if you say beach volleyball, I'm going to lie and say yes. No, literally, there really isn't any above the chest body parts needed for this sport.
Wow.
But you need them in synchronized swimming. I mean, there's I can't really think of a sport except for this one where you don't need your arms, basically. You need your brain. So let's just say chest and arms.
Chest and arms.
They just kind of hang out.
So you only need your brain.
You need your brain and your whole lower body big time. Like, that is the sport. Cycling. Yeah. Good work.
All right. What type of cycling?
So track cycling. So the velodrome in London, they called the Pringle because of the roof that they had built. Yeah, so track cycling, and middle distance, my event called Team Pursuit.
And did you win a medal?
Yes, I did. I won silver.
Okay, so how did it feel when you were standing on the podium receiving your silver medal?
Well, part of the story is I'm the oldest athlete in history in my discipline to even go to the Olympics, much less stand. So because of that, I was like a couple months shy of my 40th birthday. It felt, I think, a bit different than it might have felt if I was, 19. it was the magnitude of the experience and the totality of what it had taken to get there was probably the most overwhelming feeling I've ever had, in a good way. But the other feeling I had was one of desire for my husband and some of my family to be on the podium with me, because you stand there, and they were there in the stands cheering, but nobody ever gets there alone. And I remember feeling this kind of lonely feeling of, this is so not just about me. And I remember looking at them and going, they should change the whole entire podium Olympic program to involve two of the people that help to get you there to stand on the podium with you. That was very clear to me that they should be down there with me. So,
well, do you know what? Were you in a documentary?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've been in two. I'm not sure which one you were talking about, but
okay. So I think I watched a documentary with you in it. So anyway, so I do know you.
Yay!
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, we're old pals.
Exactly. So how did you go from Olympic athlete to doing what you just mentioned, whereby you're helping the world? How did you go from that to that, let's say?
Yeah. Well, I think since I was a little girl, there was always an activist inside of me. I had that personality, I had that way about me. I had that, I've always kind of bucked the status quo. And I've just never, I'm a terrible rule follower. If someone tells me to do something, I do the exact opposite. And so those fibers of my personality have always been there. And when I retired from cycling, I had already been not eating animals for a couple of years. And it was an extraordinary transformation, which I wasn't expecting, for my physicality and my body and my output, and then therefore my performance. So I was hooked on eating plant-based and not eating any more animals. And as I went down the rabbit hole and really truly learning, and it coming clear to me what goes on behind closed doors in animal agriculture, that activist started emerging, and that fire was lit. And I made a decision that I wanted to spend the rest of my life fighting for the voiceless, basically, those that don't have a voice in the matter. So I started an organization a little bit by mistake. I was an activist for a variety of different organizations for a while, and and a speaker and in a leafletter. I mean, I would just kind of do anything. But at the end of 2018, myself and a couple many other Olympians and a wonderful funder and a PR team, we put a commercial on the closing ceremonies of the Olympic Games in Pyeongchang in 2018. As you may or may not know, the dairy industry is the title sponsor of the United States Olympic Committee. And so we put on a commercial that was pretty shocking, because people had been listening to dairy commercials for 3 weeks during the Olympics, that said, hey, guess what? We don't need cow's milk or any kind of breast milk in our adulthood to win medals and be great and perform at a high level. And that commercial sparked what is now the organization Switch for Good that I founded.
Wow, you must have upset a few.
We pissed a lot of people off. Yeah, we pissed them off so much that it actually got kicked off. The dairy industry, saw it called NBC, and they probably spend at least a couple $1 million a year with NBC on advertisements. So NBC listened to them, and it was disappointing, because I was waiting to watch it in Los Angeles. It was supposed to run across the country, right? Started Washington, DC, Atlanta, Denver, but it never made it to me in LA, because it had been kicked off by then. So, but that was okay, because that stoked the fire even a little bit more for all of us.
So you said something quite profound. You said that you want to speak out for the voiceless. Why did you decide that was going to be your kind of way to give back to the world, to speak for the voiceless? Because you could have done many things, right? And you chose that, and there must be some maybe some backstory to why that is.
I can really only describe it as if you really are filling your day with what centers your heart, it's never a day of work. It doesn't feel like it anyway. And since I was teeny tiny, I've been madly in love with animals of all kinds. I'm an emotional empath, so I am very taken literally by animals' experiences. And when I was probably 9, I had fish in a fish tank. I had fed them the night before and forgot to close the top. And I woke up in the morning and 2 of them were on the floor. And as an emotional empath, I became, which I didn't know at the time, I really didn't learn that until a couple of years ago, trying to understand, quote, what's wrong with me and why do I feel like this all the time? But as a 9-year-old, I was completely obsessed for over a week. My mom remembers with those 2 fish and their death and the suffering, what they might have gone through, how long did it take, what actually happened when they ran out of oxygen, just totally obsessed. And I'm still that way today. Just obsessed with fairness and justice and freedom for just every living being. Animals don't speak our language. We don't speak their language. So to us, they're voiceless. They communicate in a different way. And I feel like they need an advocate. They need an activist, and we need to treat them with mutuality and respect instead of we treat them like extraction, like we just want to extract something from them. That's the only purpose that they have here. Our food animals anyway, right? We put animals in categories. We love dogs and cats and sometimes rabbits, and we eat pigs, chickens, and cows, and we test on, rabbits and monkeys, and, we have all these categories, but they're all exactly the same. So it just lives in here. And so I act on it.
Are you ready for a deep question?
Yes. That felt kind of deep, but yes.
Yeah, that was pretty deep, but a little deeper.
Okay.
Did you ever feel as a kid that you were voiceless? Did you ever feel as a kid that no one advocated for you?
No, I don't, because I had a very lovely, amazing childhood. I was one of the lucky few. Wonderful parents, still so close to them, that just gave me everything I needed to just be the best version of myself, of what, that whatever that was going to be or become. And they were really good listeners. I mean, I was always trying to break rules, so they were always telling me no, but they never made me feel like I didn't have a voice. I think they made me feel like I had actually a pretty loud voice, which is probably why I'm doing what I'm doing today, I'm assuming. I feel like people should listen. My parents listen to me. I don't know.
So I asked that question because I do a lot of reading. And one of the books that I read that really touched me in a very beautiful way was a book called The Drama of a Gifted Child. And in that book, the author Alice Miller talks about and answers the question why we do what we do, right? And that every human being is kind of in some way shaped by their childhood. And you told me the story of the fish, and that's kind of where it seems to have started. Sometimes there's deeper stuff, right? But as a kid, as a 9-year-old, maybe that is a deep thing that touches. As an empath, it touched you in a profound way that kind of led you on this path.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was the weight of the fact that it was my fault that they had jumped out was just almost more than I could bear. And I do think you're right. I think in that moment, although the clarity wasn't there on exactly what I was going to do and what I'm doing now, there was something in my DNA, in my energy that said, I'm going to fight to never let that happen again.
Mm.
Yeah.
And as an empath, because I consider myself to be an empath too, as an empath, how do you live in this crazy world that we live in? I mean, all you have to do is to turn on the news or to turn the internet on, and we are bombarded with negativity on magnified 10,000 times every single day. How would you suggest that empaths deal with that? And I ask that for the people listening, but truthfully, I ask that for myself as well.
Yeah, it takes, to me, it takes practice. It takes practice to be an empath, and it takes practice on how you are going to take steps towards whatever journey you're going down in that moment that is just too much, just too much. And how you are going to redirect or take a left turn out of it. And I know everyone can relate to the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. As an emotional empath, I got, and you know, other people that are not empaths probably also got completely entrenched and obsessed, especially those of us that are old enough to remember when that took place 20 years ago. But I've been just straight 5 nights of just complete immersion. Like, I can't pull myself out of it. And it is almost that feeling like it deserves that attention and it deserves that mourning. And it obviously doesn't, from a single random human in Irvine, California, like watching. That's a ridiculous idea. But to me, that's where that empath comes in, where you and I've had to redirect and pull back and say no more, because I'm in continual suffering, and it lasts all night long through all of my dreams and everything that I'm processing as I'm sleeping. It embeds itself. That's what an empath is, right? Like, you literally take on an experience or a feeling of another. So I have found that it requires quite a bit of discipline, and I'm not always that disciplined about it, but I try to really pay attention to if it is enlightening me or harming me. And by the 5th night of the 9/11 obsession, it was beginning to harm me. I wasn't being enlightened anymore. You know, I was, you know, they only caught so much footage. And so you're starting to watch the same horror over and over again. And I wasn't being enlightened anymore. I was definitely going down a spiral. So I, use the discipline to redirect. But I'm not saying, oh, so disciplined. I'm not, sometimes I screw it up all the time, but it does take that. And it's practice, right? Like, discipline is practice.
It most certainly is. And how would you because clearly your empathy and your ability to feel, and other people's ability to feel empathy, is a superpower, right? I talk about this quite often, but many people see it as a weakness, right?
Oh.
They'll see it as like, I can't function in this world. How would you talked about discipline, but how would you get someone who has a sensitivity, who has this intuition, this empathy that flows through them? How would you get them to utilize that as a positive, as opposed to always being on their knees because they are so sensitive?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to note and make sure that we're clear about there's 5 different types of empaths, and one of them is an emotional empath. And if you're an emotional empath, there's, like a 1 through 10. You could be a 1 or you could be a 10. I'm like a 7. But I was speaking with my cousin, who I'm quite close to, a couple nights ago. Her mom, my aunt, we've lost. literally because she was such a severe emotional empath, 10 plus 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 plus, that she literally couldn't function on planet Earth. And my cousin told me for the very first time, I'd never heard this, that she remembers her mom saying, I just never got over 9/11. And she was in Columbia, South Carolina when it happened. She wasn't there. And then we watched her deteriorate as those years went by to where she couldn't leave the house, and she wasn't functioning. So there are varying degrees. So I'm only going to speak from my emotional empath world at a 7, because I don't think we could have done anything different for my aunt, nor could she have possibly done anything for herself. I don't know. We miss her a lot, but for me, it's all about using that superpower to take action. Like that's what makes me feel good instead of terrible all the time. I also practice the discipline in not watching horrifying videos of animal suffering, right? I've seen them all. I'm definitely not at risk of starting to eat them again. Like that's not going to happen. And I felt much like the obsession with 9/11, I was feeling for a long time, like I had to keep watching them. Like if they're going to suffer, I'm going to watch it. And it became very, very debilitating to where I wasn't able to take action. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The animals are not sitting around with their scratch pad. Like, good job. You watched a 77th video. No, they need me to get out there and fucking fight. So that's an example of the discipline. I haven't watched one since. Every once in a while they pop up on social media and it's the 1 second, like shit, scroll, but that's been huge, right? So I guess that's also self-protection.
Yeah.
Discipline and self-protection.
And hopefully the people listening, specifically the empaths, will be able to take what you just said, specifically around the issue of discipline and disciplining themselves to not necessarily putting themselves in situations where their empath nature can easily be taken over by negativity, right? Sometimes you have to do it. I'm sure in your line of work, you can't always protect yourself. And when you are kind of like, maybe this is the wrong way of putting it, but attacked, your empathy is coming under attack, you then find someone who you can talk to, find someone who you can share with, find someone who, gets it, gets you, understands what you're going through. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle.
Thank you.
So I want to just switch gears a little bit. We talked about what it felt like for you to be on the podium getting that silver medal, but we didn't talk about how on earth you got to that place where you became an Olympic athlete, right? Many people grow up. Me as a kid, I wanted to be a soccer player, right? I wanted to be like Ronaldo. Clearly, I never became Ronaldo, but a lot of people want to be soccer players or they want to be Olympic athletes, but they never make it, right? So how did you go from like having that dream to actually becoming an Olympic athlete? Yeah.
Well, I didn't have that dream to start with. I loved watching the Olympics. My mom and I loved watching it together, but I wasn't currently as a little girl in any of the sports that are in the Olympics. So I was not delusional that I was going to like just be placed there one day. Little did I know. So I doing my life in my early 20s. I suffered severely from anorexia in my early 20s. And I almost lost my life to it. As I was recovering, finally, my therapist said to me, I want you to be able to move your body in a healthy way again, eventually. So let's think about some kind of movement or activity that you could pick up that would help you to move healthfully again. Part of anorexia for some people is severe overexercise disorder. I had that. And so I would spend 8-9 hours at the gym just whittling away, hoping to whittle away into nothing. So she said, I want you to pick something, right, that's not in the gym. We're not going to do this. It's not going to be the elliptical or the Stairmaster. Give me something else. And I was living out in Los Angeles by that point, and it's sunny, 360 days a year. So I thought, well, maybe I should get a bike, because that seems like I've really never ridden a bike except for when I was little on my banana seat bike around the neighborhood. And she said, I love it. That sounds so freeing and amazing, and be careful out there. But yes, I like the bike thing. So I did that. And, obviously it was a long journey, but 12 years later, I was on the Olympic podium, and it was really just because I just never quit is quite frankly the truth. Obviously I started racing, and obviously I, got noticed by the US national team, and, started track, blah, 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 the whole thing, the career unfolded. But there were 77 million times when I wanted to quit during that 12-year journey. I was way late to the game. I didn't have nearly the technical skills of my teammates or my competitors, which put me at a great disadvantage to, I never really got to some of their level actually in that sphere. But there was something in there, obviously I have a little bit of talent. I didn't have a ton. I was tested by the US Olympic Training Center, and it literally in my second year as a professional, and I did walk bike testing, lactate threshold testing, VO2 max testing, and literally the sports scientist looked at me and said my results said not Olympic level. So I was more talented than, Fred sitting next to me, but I wasn't wildly, like, oh my God, this girl's got it. So that drove me though, at that point, which was 10 years later, that they told me that I was not something. And even then though, I wasn't thinking, I'm going to go to the Olympics. It just drove me to not quit and to be better and to discover, because that's what cycling was to me. It was at first a vehicle to freedom from my disease. And then it just became this like super cool wild ride of discovery. Like, where can I go with this? I don't know. I'm just not going to quit. And I just want to see. And then, 2012 was Olympic level on the step, the second step, but shit, I'll take the second step. I would have taken the third step.
The second step is pretty epic. You mentioned anorexia. Many of us, if not all of us, have suffered some type of addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's food, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whatever it may be. And to hear a story of someone who had an addiction and found their way through that addiction, and through finding their way through became the person they are today, which is clearly a magnificent human being. That in itself is a life lesson for anyone listening to this. Yeah, because you can be at the lowest point and think that that's it. Yeah. But you can use that lowest point as a foundation to become great. And clearly that's what you did.
Well, I wish I wrote down what you just said, because I'm writing a book.
I wish I remembered what I said.
Well, it's a foundation for potentially becoming great, the lowest point.
Yes.
I'm writing a book, which is the most terrifying, not the most terrifying thing ever. It's terrifying. And that's that's going to be a chapter. So I'm going to have to get you to sign a waiver to say I can use that. That's perfect. Because it's true. Some of the subject matter that I'm traversing in the book is like, it's the same person. You're the same person. The addict is the same person that stood on the Olympic podium, right? It's those same personality traits. It's that same DNA that we were talking about earlier. It's all those same fibers. It's just shifting it into something for good, hopefully, or better than being a street addict or starving yourself to death, or whatever else you might do to destroy yourself. And I got asked all the time throughout my career, isn't this just, you think this is just replacing your anorexia? And it was like, maybe, but I'm going to take this. Like, yes, of course, yes, yes. It's not replacing the way I acted out on my pain, which was anorexia, right? It's not replacing that, but it is replacing the way that I need to live in this world, which is extremely intense, very type A, extremely driven, focused on a goal. Like, don't get in my freaking way on the way there. Like, all of that was what fueled my anorexia, and the challenge to see if I could truly starve myself to death, which was acting out on pain and moving that pain over, because I went through the pain and got out the other side of it in therapy, was now in the form of all of those driven attributes of Dotsie, but acting out in a way that was functional, I guess you could just call it, really. I don't know if it was great or amazing. I'm sure I could have chosen something else. And I really wish that I had been fighting for the voiceless for much longer than I have. But I spent 12 selfish years as an elite athlete. And that, was the same me. And it's the same me now as an activist that was anorexic.
I would say it wasn't selfish by any stretch of the imagination to do 12 years of being an elite athlete, because that gave you the platform and the life lessons to do what you do now, which is to help the voiceless get their voice back, right? So by no stretch of the imagination would I ever say that was selfish. It wasn't. You wouldn't be the person you are today with the skills you have today, with the discipline. We talked about discipline that you have today, and you wouldn't be touching as many lives as you do today if you hadn't done that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that you're right. And I try to remind myself of that, because when I was in it, it felt pretty self-serving, those 12 years, for sure. You're just so isolated. And I just felt like I wasn't really giving back anything to the world in that 12-year period of time. But now I can. And I think some of it is because people are interested that there's an athlete that's vegan that's still living and hasn't died of protein deficiency. So, hey, still here.
Some people would say that maybe your greatest success was becoming an Olympic athlete at 39 and winning a silver medal. I would say that maybe your greatest success was finding a way through your anorexia. That is a sign of someone with an iron will. That is a sign of someone who can feel their pain and transmute it into gold, right? Yeah. What would you say to someone who is suffering, not necessarily just from anorexia, right? But, maybe anorexia, some type of addiction, and they, by some fluke, they managed to be listening to this little conversation of ours. What would you say to them? And they're at their worst point. They're like on the floor. They're in despair. What would you say to them?
Well, if you're on the floor and in despair, you're probably contemplating suicide. And that's where I got. And I think it's in that moment, if I had known that I wasn't going to have to flush myself down the toilet to heal and return to life and get better, that would have been kind of inspiring in the moment. Because I think when you're struggling deeply from your own demons and you're acting out on that pain, like we said, whatever form it is, alcohol, drugs, food, you feel completely helpless and lost. And like the way out is it's just way too long of a tunnel or a journey to possibly even remotely think of getting there to the end. And you think you're going to have to totally transform who you are and almost become someone else, because who I am now is complete shit. It's complete dirt. It's just crap. That's how I felt about myself. And if you're at your lowest, that's how you feel. you don't have to become someone else. You will remain you. You will just be able to, through some tough work. And that's always that's the hard stuff, because you're not always ready for that work. I mean, I relapsed a bazillion times before it was like, okay. And then a few more times. And then it was like, okay, all right. So that's okay. Let that be. That's going to happen. Just, you know, go ahead and sign up for that, because that's the way it's going to roll. But it would have been really freeing to find out that I wouldn't have to lose myself, that I'm just going to become and transform into just a better version of me. But all of me is still going to be there. And it really is. Because I just thought, I don't know how I can erase all this. How can I not become who I've become? Well, I hadn't become, I was that person when I was born, right? I was born with this structure and this.
And you can't really erase who you are, right?
Yeah.
There's a famous Japanese story that I'm going to completely butcher, but
okay.
Basically, the guy had a mug, it broke, and he fixed it by putting gold in all, instead of just glue, it was golden glue.
Okay.
Right? So I don't know if you've heard that story.
I don't think I have, no.
But the way that I'm explaining it is diabolically awful. But basically, you become better when you are broken, assuming that you can fix yourself. Now, that sounded like it was terrible, but you see what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Golden road.
Exactly.
To healing. Yeah.
So look, you know, we could clearly talk for a long time. I want to thank you for coming on today. And it's always interesting how these conversations move. Like, clearly, I didn't know you. Now I do. I'm going to Google you after this. I'm going to be like, oh my God, why didn't you ask her this question? Right. But
I'm sure that happens with every single person you interview. Like,
well, exactly. The whole point is just to like have a genuine conversation, right?
Exactly.
You to be able to like share your truth, share your story, for me to be able to get to know you, for the audience, hopefully to get to learn something, and for the world to be that much, just that little bit better. And if one person who's suffering from addiction, just one, listened to this conversation and was like, oh, wow, if she can do it, then I can do it. Yeah. Maybe that one person will be brave enough to send you a message. Are you on Instagram? Yeah. What's your Instagram?
Vegan Olympian.
Vegan Olympian. All right. So maybe one day you'll get a message from someone that heard this little chat, and you can be that beacon of hope that, I hope so. That they need more than anything. Because sometimes all it takes, literally all it takes, is one human being to see you, one human being to feel you, one human being to understand you, for things to start to change. So let's see. Leon, I appreciate the opportunity for you and this platform that you've created. It's really intriguing. It really is. It's I've done a lot of podcasts, and this is by far the top two most exciting and fun and curious and interesting ones I've done. It just was a blast, and it went by in a hot second. So thank you for providing this. No worries. I know you're helping loads and loads of people in all sorts of different categories and all different areas of the earth with you doing this show. That's very sweet. Thank you so much. And by the way, we're neighbors. I live in LA. Oh, how cool. Okay, yes. There you go. So what's up there? If you ever find yourself in Los Angeles, let me know. Send me an email or a message, and we'll go to Crossroads together. You know. Oh, that would be great. I love it. So, Crossroads, for anyone who's listening, is a vegan restaurant that I go to all the time. Best one. By the way, I'm a vegan. Oh, shut up. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I wouldn't have guessed, because you were like very coy about that's great. Yeah. All right. Well, double high fives. And that is a yes on Crossroads then. Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you, my friend, my new friend. All right. Okay. Bye. Cheers. Hello, everyone. It's Leon here, aka the Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you that I have a new video out in the world.